Whew. All right, guys. Week 1 of the 2025 NFL season is here. I mean, I've already had 2 games, but a full slate of Sunday games and Monday Night Football are on the books. So you know what we're going to do before you set those starting fantasy lineups. Here are 6 things that you absolutely need to know. Starting with the fact that Christian McCaffrey is going to play in today's game versus the Seahawks this afternoon. Well, I don't actually know that for sure at the time I'm recording this, but I am personally expecting Christian McCaffrey to play in this week 1 matchup on the road against the Seattle Seahawks. I know there's been more than enough of a scare here throughout the course of the past couple of days if you are a Christian McCaffrey owner, but most of the reporting is indicating that Christian McCaffrey is expected to play. He's going to be listed as questionable, but is going to play. I do think that there are a couple, this is something that I talked about in yesterday's stream, right? Our fantasy Q&A stream was, I think that what's going to likely happen is Christian McCaffrey is going to be active and play, but it's going to be a little bit more difficult to call should you start Christian McCaffrey because you still got guys like Brian Robinson, now Isaac Garando off of the injury report, who will be active as well. Then you're going to be put in this situation like, do I want to risk Christian McCaffrey still dealing with a calf injury, a type of injury that can be easily re-aggravated, in my starting lineup? And quite frankly, my answer is just yes. You drafted Christian McCaffrey. You're in for the ride. You knew what you were getting in for. The upside is absolutely ridiculous with Christian McCaffrey. I mean, even in a disastrous year last year, essentially, where he had 0 touchdowns, he still averaged 12 fantasy points per game. And in the 2 previous seasons, he averaged 21 or more fantasy points per game, 24.5 in 2023 per game. RB1 in fantasy points per game 2023, RB1 in fantasy, and the RB2 in fantasy points per game in 2022. And in that season, he finished as the RB2 overall in fantasy football. Listen, this is what you're getting at this point in Christian McCaffrey's career. Just start him. As long as he's active, which I will go ahead and say again, I technically don't know for sure that Christian McCaffrey will be active, but maybe by the time this video comes out, we know for sure. And I think that looking at most of the reporting, I believe that Christian McCaffrey will play today. We'll find out what happens. If he doesn't play, I don't think that Brian Robinson or Isaac Garando are going to be like super high upside starts. They're more desperation RB2s, not players that you need to flex or anything. And I would anticipate Brian Robinson get more carries than Isaac Garando since he just came off of the injury report, but who knows in a Kyle Shanahan offense. But once again, I think C-Mac's going to play. If you own him, this is what you wish for. Start him. The upside is still way too high in a good matchup to ignore. And continuing with the theme of San Francisco 49ers players, let's talk about Jauan Jennings, who has mysteriously healed from his own calf injury after getting a reworked contract that will include much higher incentives based on playing time in 2024. He is off of the injury report and has been off the injury report for more than 48, 72 hours at this point. And he's going to play today in a good matchup against the Seattle Seahawks, who allowed the 21st most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers last year. Now, I don't personally believe that Jennings will be lining up as the true wide receiver 1. I believe that Ricky Pearsall will get that luxury. But ultimately, what I do want to say, if you are a Ricky Pearsall owner, this is good for Ricky Pearsall. It will take away a lot of the defensive pressure throughout certain plays in this game. And Ricky Pearsall is still a very strong start. One of my worries for Pearsall, although I've been really high on him throughout the week, was the circumstance that the Niners were going to just deploy Ricky Pearsall and Sky Moore and Russell Gage, MVS, whoever it was going to be. And that would make the opposing defense, not really have a huge task and be able to hone in, outside of Kittle and CMC, basically just on Pearsall, which made me actually a little bit nervous. But with Jennings on the field, I certainly think Pearsall is a very strong start. I think that Jauan Jennings is a fine flex option. I wouldn't call him anything more than that, as he still missed a majority of training camp, had injuries like floating around. We don't know how serious the injuries were and how much they had to do with the contract situation, but ultimately, he's good to go. active for this game, and he is going to be a flex option for you guys who did go out and draft him during draft season. So the contract is done. He's going to be a player who has nice upside and an offense that has been extremely pass heavy over the past 2 seasons. If you own Jennings, you can certainly start him here in week 1. The next thing that you need to know is that Mike Evans is going to score a touchdown in today's matchup against the Atlanta Falcons. I'm calling it. I just don't see any scenario where this matchup does not lead to Mike Evans scoring a touchdown. And that's basically all I have to say about this. In all seriousness, this is a fantastic matchup against the Atlanta Falcons, who gave up the most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers last year. I mean, AJ Terrell is a good number 1 corner, don't get me wrong, but I just see this being one of those matchups where a lot of points are scored. I know everybody has said this throughout the course of the week, and I just really can't look at either team here and not expect both teams to put up points through the air and probably on the ground as well. We look at, last year's matchups between these two teams, a lot of points scored. A little bit different quarterback situation for the Falcons this year, all that stuff, but still, I see both these teams coming out and having a huge day, and ultimately Mike Evans is a player who I think is just going to have a massive day. I know this isn't a crazy call, right? I mean, I'm sure you've heard this somewhere else throughout the week, and I love guys like Emeka Egbuka this week as a strong flex. I think Bucky Irving, Baker Mayfield, this entire offense in terms of their starters is going to have a great day, but I also think the Falcons are going to have a really good day too. But Bijan Robinson, Drake London, once again, these players are players that are going to be in your starting lineup no matter what. But once again, week 1 in the red zone, I think Mike Evans is going to get a lot of opportunities throughout the course of this game. The Bucs are going to throw the football a ton, and I just don't see a world where Mike Evans does not score a touchdown in what is probably the best overall matchup that we're going to see any player get here in week 1. I'm feeling so confident in Mike Evans scoring a touchdown that I'm going to double down and head straight to Underdog to take the over on Mike Evans to score a touchdown. If you guys are new to Underdog, make sure to sign up using promo code THECATCH. That link is down below, and Underdog is automatically going to give you a free gimme pick to use toward week 1 NFL action. Take that free pick, take Mike Evans to score a touchdown, and if both of those picks hit, you will automatically double your cash entry. Plus, you're going to get a 50% deposit match up to $1,000. And Underdog has a new offer for all new users who sign up using promo code THECATCH. As soon as you play through $5 on Underdog, they're going to give you a bonus $50 to use towards week 1 NFL action. So make sure you guys are signing up using promo code THECATCH if you want to take advantage of all of their week 1 exclusive offers. All right, the next thing that you need to know is that Devon Achane is fully off of the injury report. He is good to go, dealing with a calf injury. A lot of calf injuries in today's video. And he's going to play against the Colts in a great matchup against a defense that allowed the 22nd most fantasy points to opposing running backs last year. And I will say, calf injuries can be easily re-aggravated. They can lead to further injuries like Achilles issues, for example. But I'm just trying to not panic here when it comes to a player like Devon Achane. The upside is just way too high. The RB6 in fantasy points per game last season, the RB5 overall in PPR, and ultimately we just know that the ceiling is too high here. And I think ultimately, kind of similar with Christian McCaffrey, if he drafted Devon Achane, I mean, this is kind of part of the deal, right? He has had some injury issues, at least in his rookie season. Last year, not so much, but you also know he's tied somewhat to the health of Tua Tagovailoa as well. There's risk when it comes to basically every Dolphins player, but a player like Devon Achane, but this ceiling is high. There's definitely a possibility that we see a little bit of Ollie Gordon come into this game and spell Devon Achane at times, especially if this is one of those matchups where the Colts are not succeeding. But I don't know how much I really believe in the Dolphins. I think this is kind of an interesting matchup. This is in Indianapolis, by the way. But, if there's a scenario where the Dolphins are up on the Colts and they're able to pull ahead early and often in this game, we could see more Ollie Gordon than Devon Achane potentially. But there's also a chance that, if the Dolphins are consistently needing to throw the football and stay in this matchup, that we'll see more Devon Achane and him used more in the passing game as well. So I still think either way, the floor is pretty safe with Achane here in week 1, and that we could see a game script that actually benefits Achane overall. But I won't be surprised if we see some Ollie Gordon mixed in. But just don't forget, guys, there are plenty of backfields throughout the NFL that do utilize more than one running back, and the true RB1 on the team or for fantasy purposes is completely fine, even if the other running back gets 8 touches and 3 targets or whatever it is. So maybe Ollie Gordon vultures a touchdown in this game. It's just too hard to say. He shot up to 62% rostered overall, and I do think he's worth rostering and is a very strong handcuff, but I just don't think you guys can go out and start Ollie Gordon with full confidence here in week 1 looking for standalone value. To me, Ollie Gordon is just a handcuff until further notice, a good handcuff, but I don't think we can call him anything more than that. If you own Devon Achane, fire him up. Once again, this is what you signed up for. The upside very high in a good matchup here in week 1. Next thing that you need to know is that Travis Hunter is being listed as a quote-unquote every down wide receiver in week 1 and will be playing as a situational cornerback / backup cornerback against the Carolina Panthers. So, this is a great matchup, first of all, in terms of any wide receiver, as the Panthers allowed the 25th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers last year. This is a great matchup across the board. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse. We've talked about this matchup in every video this week, but the Panthers and the Jags were in the bottom 10 in terms of fantasy points allowed against quarterbacks, tight ends, wide receivers, and running backs, both teams last year. And these defenses are not that much better on paper whatsoever compared to last year. This is one of those games that has a ton of sneaky fantasy value. And I think that Travis Hunter, like the reports are indicating, is just primarily going to be playing as a wide receiver in his first NFL start. I'm sure he'll get some sort of defensive snaps overall. But here in week 1, I think that Travis Hunter is a flex option that has some nice upside overall. There's certainly some risk. He's still a rookie. He's going to play some sort of defense. It's going to be an interesting situation to see how it shakes out. But ultimately, this matchup's good enough that if you own Travis Hunter, I think he is a viable flex option depending on your roster and what other players are on your team. But once again, the matchup is good enough here. We can basically start anybody across the board, like I said, in this matchup. And the Jags get Cincinnati in week 2, so we're going to get a really good kind of feel for Travis Hunter, at least in soft matchups before they face the Texans, the Niners, and the Chiefs in the following 3 weeks. But I do like Travis Hunter as a flex option, and the latest report, I think, is positive when it comes to fantasy purposes outside of IDP leagues, I guess. But ultimately, you own Hunter. You want to roll the dice in week 1. Depends on the roster, but I think ultimately it is okay as we prepare for today's action. The last thing that you need to know is that David Njoku could seriously be the tight end #1 overall in week 1 of fantasy football. I know we talked about this in the sneaky starts video. I know other people have probably brought this up throughout the week in terms of where you get your content or fantasy info from, but seriously, this matchup is too good to ignore. The Bengals allowed the second most fantasy points to opposing tight ends last year, 31st overall against the position. We got Joe Flacco at the quarterback position. Joe Flacco, David Njoku together. 30 catches for David Njoku, 390 receiving yards, 4 touchdowns in the total 5 games they have played together. In the last 2 games where David Njoku faced Cincinnati last year, he had 23.6 fantasy points and 14.6 fantasy points with 24 total targets, 18 catches in those 2 games last year in 2024. There's nothing here in any way, shape, or form that does not insinuate David Njoku not having a monster game as long as he is healthy. So if you own David Njoku, you have to start him. You're probably at this point already starting him with confidence, but I'll say it again. David Njoku can be viewed as strong as a wide receiver this week. He's a player that can be flexed if you have more than one tight end. And ultimately, when I really look at the makeup of this matchup, as much as I like it for all the running backs and wide receivers included, although I do think the Browns have a good run defense, right? But across the board, even with some of the extreme stud names in this matchup, guys like Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Chase Brown. I really like Jerry Jeudy in this matchup, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there are other interesting names like Cedric Tillman, the Browns running backs, but I think at the end of the day, the player who has the most upside, outside of Jamar Chase and maybe Chase Brown, but the player who has the most upside just based on the matchup here on paper is David Njoku. I mean, this guy could have an absolutely insane game and is a lock for double-digit fantasy points at the end of the day. And I think that he could actually outscore Jerry Jeudy in this matchup, but only time will tell. I still think that's going to be a game. Both teams are going to be forced to throw the football a lot. There's going to be a lot of points scored in this one. David Njoku's just set for a monster performance. And like I said, I don't think it's crazy to say he could seriously finish as the tight end #1 overall in week 1 fantasy football. And there you guys have it. There are 6 things that you need to know before Sunday's kickoff here in week 1 of the 2025 fantasy football season. But as a bonus, I will add, just take a deep breath, guys. It's a long season. I know we're 2 games in already. I know a lot has already happened, but it's a long fantasy season. Do not overreact. Through week 1 last year, the top 3 scoring fantasy wide receivers were Cooper Kupp, Jaden Reed, and Allen Lazard. Okay, and Jamar Chase finished as the wide receiver 37 in week 1 last year. Don't panic. There's going to be a lot that happens. Don't overreact. And it's still, regardless of what happens here in week 1, very, very early in a long fantasy football season. So sit back, have some fun, watch some good football today. And don't forget to subscribe on the way out, because all we do here is free fantasy football content all year long. Redraft, Dynasty, and Best Ball. If you're into that, be sure to subscribe. Drop any fantasy football questions in the comments down below. If you guys need anything whatsoever, I'll answer as many comments as I can before kickoff. When the videos pop up on the screen, check out whatever you guys need. We have it here on the channel for week 1. Help you guys get those last minute preparation, starts, sits in. And ultimately, remember, you saw it here on The Catch.